Hey, good afternoon everybody. Today I'm going to show you how to make Xiao, which is a Chinese dim sum that is also known in the foodie world as XLBs. And they're also known at dim sum either as Soup Dumplings or Juicy Dumplings. And the reason they call them that is that this is a really nice little dumpling that when it's prepared in the way I'm going to show you, at the end, when you bite into it, there's actually soup inside the dumpling. And it's a little bit of work, well, a fair amount of work. Some people might say too much work, but if you've ever tasted these things, you don't care how much work it is. It's a 4-step process, and all of it's pretty laid back. You can do it in pieces. You don't have to rush through it and do it all at once. First thing to do is get the stock ready. And for that, you're going to need after you get your stock going, you're going to let that simmer for a couple hours. You can go do something else. And the other 3 stages are you've got to prepare the filling, and then you've got to make the wrappers and then steam them. So it's really not that bad. Let's get going. So you're definitely going to need a big stock pot for this. I've got 3 pounds, about 3 pounds. You can do 2 to 3 pounds of chicken wings. And what I do is I just give these a quick rinse under the tap before I put them in the stock pot, just under some cold water. Next, get your side pork. Now, I couldn't get one piece. I had some sliced side pork here. Basically what it is you want a half a pound of unsmoked bacon in one piece with the rind on, and then you're going to slice it up. This already comes pre-sliced. So it works for me, and I'm just going to dump this in as is, of course, giving it a quick rinse first. Next is the prosciutto. Now, ideally you should be using Chinese ham. Chinese ham is really hard to find in most places. That's why I experimented with prosciutto. The flavor came out great, and prosciutto is pretty easy to find in most places. Now, this is a 4-ounce pack. You need 2 ounces for this. So what I do is just kind of eyeball how many slices I've got. So it looks like there's 8 slices in the pack. So I'll just take off the first 4. Now, one thing I should say about this is even if you don't want to make the dumplings, this makes a killer chicken broth that you can use in any kind of dish that you need a highly seasoned, flavorful broth. And it does freeze really well, which is nice. For the ginger, you want about 1 inch, what they call coins. And you know, it seems in wintertime it's really hard to get good ginger. You got little knobby pieces everywhere, and you got to really check it because some of it's gone bad already in the store. This piece looks pretty good. So what I do is I just cut off the outsides, make sure I haven't got any bad bits, take a good look at it in the inside. Yeah, so this piece is looking pretty good. That's about 1 inch. And by the way, ginger is so cheap. This whole thing I think was 18 cents, so I wouldn't worry about losing a bit on the trimmings. So then after, what you want to do is just slice it in a few slices like that. And just toss that in the stock pot. I'm going to be putting these in whole, so what you want to do is just peel it quick. Just take off the ends. Give them a bit of a smash. Make sure they're all good. And for the green onions, you're going to pick 3 out of the bunch there. They look pretty good. And I will give these a quick rinse, making sure to check the ends. If there's any discolored bits, pull them off. And just cut off just the roots. And you can throw them in like this, or you can tie them in a knot if you want to make them easier to get out. I just throw them in loose. And for the seasoning, you're just going to pour in a tablespoon of Xiao wine. If you can't get this stuff, it's the amber colored cooking wine. Just use some cooking sherry. A couple of quarts of water. Pour that in. Let's give that a bit of a stir with a wooden spoon. Making sure that all of your ingredients are submerged. This is going to be simmering for 2 hours, so if you're not quite there, feel free to add a little bit more water because this is going to be cooking down anyways. Even after it simmers, there's a boil down step, so don't worry about too much. The more water you add, though, is going to extend your cooking time, so just keep that in mind. But I will put in just a little bit more, maybe about half a cup or a cup. And I'm going to set that on high till it comes to a full boil, and then I'm going to turn it down to simmer. Now it appears to have come to a boil. Full boil is quite nice. So I'm going to turn this heat right down to low. And what you should do is get a small bowl and some kind of skimmer and get like the froth like that off the top. It's okay to give it a stir at this point. The froth will come back up to the top. You end up having a cleaner broth that tastes better if you do this every so often. And then just let it simmer on low for 2 hours. You can either simmer it uncovered or partially covered. If you do cover it partially, just make sure some steam can escape, and do check on it every half an hour or so to top up the water if you need to, and also remove any of the scum that might have formed again. It's been 2 hours now on gentle simmer, and as you can see, and I will zoom for this, if you look at the edges of the broth, I'll just pick very carefully, you can see all the gelatin that's come out of the pork and the chicken bones. Okay, this is really important for the final soup, for the dumplings to come out properly. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to strain the large pieces out into a bowl. Any flavor or nutritional value has gone into the soup. I wouldn't save the leftovers, just get them out of there. I do turn the heat off briefly while I'm doing this because I don't want a dry pan. Once all the solids are out, I get my Pyrex back there, put a mesh strainer over it, and start ladling the broth to help clarify it for whatever was missed on the skim. So what I'm going to do now, so that's what was left after a strain, is I'm going to let that cool off a bit, and I'll bring the camera back down so you can see the fat starting to separate. You can see that at the top. I do want to get a fair amount of fat out of here, but I don't want to lose all the gelatin either. So I'll let that settle for a bit, and then I'll start skimming and clean the pot up quick to do the reduction in. This is worth a quick minute to show you. To clean this, I always just use hot water and a scrubbing pad, like a nylon pad. Listen to that, okay? Just a little elbow grease, you get that completely clean. And the reason I do it this way, and you can also feel the edges to see if there's any stuck-on bits with your fingers. The reason I do it this way is you did not spend 2 hours making a broth to forget to rinse your pan and have it taste like dish soap, okay? If you do it like this, you have no needs of worries because the broth is going to be at full boil and there's no risk of germs. Here's where we get to the skim. This is the tricky part. Now, you'll notice while I'm skimming that what came up as gelatin has gone right to the top. You don't want to throw this out. Take that off and put it in the stock pot. Get as much of that off the top without the fat that you can before you get yourself a little bowl and skim the fat. Let me move down here so you can see why. Okay, so you see that? That's fat. That you want out of your broth. Now, you're obviously going to be leaving some in because your skim is not going to be perfect unless you're like, well, I spent half a day on this. But you also do not want a greasy broth. If you've got a gravy separator, go ahead. The one I have causes more mess than it's worth. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. More than half the fat is gone, and the small amount that's there is just going to add flavor to the soup without making it greasy. So I'll put that in and bring it to a boil. So since you want to boil this about halfway down, and there's no exact way to do it, what I do is I get my wooden spoon and I dip it in it, take a look at about where halfway down is on the spoon, and just keep this as a test. We should be there or close enough. So let that chill there for a minute and put that back in. Yeah, there we are, halfway. So what I'll do is I'll get the strainer out again to clarify it one last time before I set it to chill. You will find you'll need an oven mitt to hold the pan this time. It's a little hotter than it was last time. Now you will see that there was not as much sediment this time. It's nearly clean. And let's see how close we got. A touch over 1 quart, which is fine. So it did reduce nearly by half, which is quite all right. So what I'll do now is get a pan to pour this out in so it cools down as quickly as possible. Got another oven safe pan that I've rinsed out, and just to show you quickly, you can see it's starting to gel on the top even though it's still hot, which is exactly what you want. Now what I'm going to do is I will take a small ladle and put it in the bottom of the pan and just let that warm up for a minute. I may be being overly cautious, but after all this work, no, you don't want your pan to crack on the stove because it was too cold, okay? I'll let that cool off here a bit, and then I'll pop it outside where I checked, and it's -4 centigrade, which is nice and cool. So that should cool that down quickly. Well, the sun's going to be going down soon, and I know it looks like a Christmas card, but let's hope that the pan is cooled sufficiently that it doesn't shatter on the back porch, and we'll just see how that goes. The next step is to prepare the filling while the broth is cooling. Now, I'm going to be grinding my pork today because unless you can get to an Asian market, which I was not able to, and get like extra lean ground pork, you'll have to grind your own because the one at the store is just too fatty. Now, for the seasonings, you know, when I first started experimenting and testing this recipe, I found the ginger posed a problem. It should be in here, but if you grate it or even chop it, it just is too much. So what I found is that if I just take one good slice and pound it with the back of the cleaver and just put that in the bowl and let it marinate in the seasonings until I'm ready to put the meat in, you get just enough flavor and it doesn't overpower the dish. So first the ginger, then the Xiao wine. What I'll do is I'll just let that sit and start working on the pork. But right before I do, so I don't have to get a new cutting board, because the pork will get it quite greasy, I just got 3 green onions here that are rinsed and trimmed. Now for this, you want the white part and a little bit of the green, but you don't want too much of the green. And just chop these up extremely fine. So once you've got your green onions chopped up nearly to a paste, and just get them up on your cleaver, add them to the seasonings. And you actually don't even need to clean your board here. What I would do is trim the fat, because there will be some residual chicken fat left, and you don't want to be adding any pork fat at this point. These are very lean to start off with and hardly need any trimming. So those are trimmed up nice, and what I'll do is I'll just cut each one lengthwise and get out the meat grinder. I'm going to be grinding this twice. I'm going to be using a coarse grind for the first one, and so I'll do it right on the board, and then pick this up and then do the fine grind right into the bowl. I've got the slice of ginger out. I'll just give you a quick look. Yeah, I kind of got it up in a sort of ball shape, so it feeds quite nicely. You just get a handful and push that in. Yes, I will need the stomper for this one. Just pulled in the broth to see how it's doing. And as you can see, it's cooling off quite nicely. What I will take advantage of now before it's completely cold is to take off the fat that has risen to the top in one layer. So that's back out on the porch. And what I will do now is just mix in the seasonings into the pork with a spoon and put this into the fridge to chill until the broth is ready. So I brought the dish in. Now this is not frozen, this is just cold. And you can see how the cooking process produced the gel we need to make the dumplings. And yes, it's worth it. You don't have to make dumplings with all this. You can use the rest for soup. I am going to freeze the rest right now because the flavor is just amazing. You can either do it in bags or ice cube trays. Now, how much you want to put in each batch, because this is going to make 24, is a matter of preference here. I'm going to use a quarter and eyeball it against the amount of meat I've got, because you want juicy dumplings, but you don't want so much soup that they like float away, right? So what I'm going to do is just scoop out a quarter of this and put that in the bowl here so you can see what it's like. And I'm going to leave you for a second while I freeze the rest immediately, because if you just leave it in a fridge, it will go bad in a few days, and this is just too good to have it go bad. Oh gee, I started without you again. Good thing it's not completely done. What I was saying is that if you look at some recipes, they get very fancy and they'll tell you to take a cube of jelly like this. And as you can see, this is not frozen. This is just set perfectly. And they'll wrap some meat around it. It seems really complicated to me. The fastest, easiest way I've found is you just get a big tined fork like this and just start mashing the jelly into the pork until it's nice and even. You want to be fairly quick about this because what you want to do is you want to get all the jelly mixed in evenly through the filling, but you don't want to let it warm up so long that it actually starts to melt and turn to soup now, because you want it to do that later inside the dumplings. So once this is good, I'm going to pop this back in the fridge and I'm going to start working on the wrappers.